Hi guys, welcome to Quarantine Cooking. Today we're going to be working on breaking down a chicken, a good thing to know how to do when you can't go to the stores and get pre-made chickens. So we're going to start with our basic chicken. I'll tell you some of the anatomy, I'll tell you a little bit about the knives that I would use to break down a chicken, and I'll tell you a couple different ways that I like to use chicken. So obviously we've got our breasts right here, our legs, our thighs down here, wings, wing tips, and our little drumettes right here. So the way I'm going to do it is going to be going through the least amount of bone. That way you don't need anything except for a knife to do this. Many ways use scissors and cut out the spine, and while that's a great way, it's not always conducive for everybody's home kitchen. So we're going to start with the wings. There's a couple ways that you could do this, but we're going to start by just cutting the wings off. So what I did was I found the joint right here between the drumette and the flat. It's easy to find because it's right at the V. If you cut right through that little skin flap, you can start to see the knuckle right there. One way to do it is just to go straight through with your knife, or if you can't quite find it, you can snap it, and that will show you exactly where to cut, and then there's nothing more to cut through. You can put the edge of your knife right in between that gap and just cut right through. So you're left with these two wings. These are the flat and the wing tip. The wing tip is not really edible and makes great stock because it's full of gelatin. To remove that, it's going to be a very, very similar thing where you're looking for the joint, and because it's mostly collagen, once you find the joint, you can just chop right through. There you have your flat, which would be delicious chicken wings or great in stock or however you'd like to eat it. This, again, not really edible, really only good for stock. So I'm going to remove that on this one as well. Again, finding the middle and chopping right through. Moving on, now we have the chicken with only the drumette, breast, thigh, and leg attached. When I break down a chicken, I like to break it down into halves. When you have a half, you can cook the entire half together, and that's a great way to cook a chicken for a crowd of people, but it's also makes it easier to identify the other pieces. Often people will cut off the leg first and then cut off the breast and then separate everything from there. I prefer to do it all in one so that you can keep it together. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by finding the breastbone right here. Currently, as you can see, this chicken is facing me, and I think that's the easiest. Wishbone will be down here, and we're going to go along the breastbone until we get to the wishbone. Now, you can't really see, but the wishbone is right here, and your knife will have run into that and stopped. I'm going to turn the chicken around, cut all the way up to right there, and as you can see, the breastbone and then the breastplate is exposed right here. Turn it back and very carefully go along the bones down and to the where the drumette attaches to the carcass. Right there, there's a small joint, and we just want to get our knife in between the joint and the rest of the carcass and go right through. You should not have to cut through any bone here. There's just a little bit of cartilage that any stiff knife will be able to get through easily. Now, I'm going to turn it so that I have this breast kind of to my left, and slowly, using the tip of the knife, I'm going to go along the carcass, getting as much meat as I can. Here, I've cut between the carcass and the leg, and I'm actually going to very carefully go between the membrane and the rest of the chicken. So this part is a little bit tough and not necessary. This is where I like, but you could easily cut right here and leave that attached to this chicken leg. Maybe on the next side we'll do that. So still going down. This is where the drumette was attached to the carcass, and I'm going to just very carefully go right again along now the ribs. We want to be careful not to cut through the ribs because then you're going to leave them on the breast, and we don't want any of that. Down closer to the thigh, right here we start to feel the bottom of the carcass, and this is where all of the thigh attaches to the carcass. And we just want to take the tip of our knife and go right in between the meat as close to the carcass as possible and cutting down towards the tail of the chicken right here. Once we've kind of cut away from there, and now as you can see we have the carcass a little bit exposed but still touching some of the meat. Right here is where the joint of the leg goes into the carcass, and we're going to firmly grasp the thigh, grab the rest of the carcass, and pop that right out. Now you have just a little bit left attaching the carcass to the rest of this chicken. So at this point we're just going to go along the carcass. Right here is what's called the oyster, and it's a little indent into the carcass, and we can use the tip to really go in and around there. Not necessary to get it all out, but it's a nice tender part of the chicken that we'd really like to eat. So as we go along this bone, just gently and sort of pushing the carcass with the side of the knife. As we're pushing, we're going to use the edge and just draw it back, slice all the way off. Now you're left with half of a chicken. Here we have the drumette, the breast, the thigh, and the leg. I often like to leave it like this and just cook it as half chicken. Here you can also see the tender is still attached. You can either pull that off and cook it separately, or leave it on the breast and just have some extra meat with your breast. Moving on to the next side, it's all the same. You're just doing it right on the other side. So again, feeling for this breastbone right here, the whole knife right against it, sliding down carefully, turning it around, going down to the wishbone. Right here you can faintly see the outline of the wishbone. We're just going to go along that with the side of our knife until we reach the joint where the drumette attaches to the carcass. Again, sticking our knife right in between that joint and just pressing down. Flipping the chicken back around so that we can easily go along the carcass with the tip of our knife. As we follow through, just carefully, and then, as I said last time, the membrane right here, which we can leave on, and that is just right where the chicken attaches to the carcass, and that membrane can be left on or off. It's up to you. It doesn't really change any of the cooking or the breakdown. Here again, we're going to go right through the right next to the carcass along the leg meat until we're close, and then again holding the chicken firmly and popping the joint out of the socket. Here I always turn the chicken around so I can go nice and close to that carcass, gripping here, carefully watching your fingers, going along the carcass, in and around that oyster, and then down and through the skin. So you're just left with the carcass, which has still a little bit of meat on it. Not a problem. That'll be delicious when we make stock. So now that you have this half chicken, there's a couple things you can do with this. So as I said, you can leave it whole, which is my preference, or you can start to break it down into its other parts. So the first big cut will be right there. Then you just have the breast with tender and with the drumette. This is what is called an airline breast and gives you a little bit of dark meat with your white meat, which a lot of people really like. If you want, from here, you can cut off the drumette, which you do by following right under the joint. There's a slight line of fat right here that you just want to follow. Draw it out that way, turn it around, and on the other side, basically just do the exact same thing. So here, we've got our little drumette. This would be your classic chicken wing drumette. And then from here, we've got our chicken breast, we can pull off the tender. The tender doesn't need to be cut. It just comes right off. Again, now we have a boneless, skin-on chicken breast that can be cooked however you like to cook chicken breasts. From here, we have our thigh and our leg, both still attached. The easiest way to separate them is pull some of the skin back. I like to flip it this way. You have a bone coming this way, and then right along this little seam of fat is basically where you're gonna cut. You're gonna feel with your fingers and find the joint. Once you find that joint, you're gonna place the heel of your knife right in between and give it a nice slide through, so that now all you have left is a chicken leg, still skin on, chicken breast, bone in, still skin on, and that is that half of a chicken. From here, if you'd like, and this is a bit more advanced but not very hard, you can take the bone out of the thigh, and this is actually easy to do on any part of the chicken. This really just requires going along the bone with the tip of your knife. So basically, you're just gonna follow it until you can see the bone, and you're gonna come on both sides of the bone until you can see almost the whole thing. You don't wanna cut too deep so that you cut it in half. You're basically just gonna follow lightly with the tip of your knife along each side. Eventually, you're gonna be able to pinch almost the entire bone away from the thigh. Then you'll slip the tip of the knife between, out and across, and then using a scraping motion, clean the rest of the meat off of the thigh. Now you're just left with another bone that'll be great in stock with the rest of your carcass, and a skin-on boneless chicken thigh. These are fun if you want to stuff. You can fill it with some other vegetables and herbs, wrap it up, sear it, and braise it, and you'll have a delicious chicken thigh. And that's it for breaking down a chicken.